and thank our witnesses for appearing before us today on such short notice. I'd also like to thank Mr. Langerman, the chair of the Emerging Threats Subcommittee, for taking leadership on this issue. Last week, when news of this incident broke, he brought the issue to my attention and stressed the importance of today's hearing. I appreciate his leadership on biopreparedness and related issues for the committee. Ladies and gentlemen, last week we dodged a bullet. That's pretty much how I feel after reviewing the efforts of the Center for Disease Control and the Department of Homeland Security as they dealt with the case of the newlywed TB carrier, Mr. Andrew Speaker, over the last several months. But before I get into the facts of this case, I got a fundamental question that I want the administration to answer. When are we going to stop dodging bullets and start protecting Americans? As you know, we were just very fortunate in this situation. The 9/11 Commission asserted that the terrorist attack in 2001 was a result of a failure of imagination by the federal government. Our intelligence components weren't talking to one another. Intelligence information was stovepiped. There was a failure to connect the dots. The Department of Homeland Security was created to enhance the synergy and efficiency of Homeland Security efforts by several agencies, putting them under one department. But since we've learned that the federal government's ability to secure the homeland is still grossly deficient in some areas, in 2005, the department's response to Hurricane Katrina was characterized as a failure of initiative. Officials knew a hurricane was coming, and yet department's leadership failed to respond timely or effectively. Today I'm wondering why we shouldn't characterize the actions of the department and the CDC in a similar fashion. I've asked the witnesses to provide us with a timeline of events that began with the testing of a TB sample and ended with Mr. Speaker sneaking his way back into the United States unimpeded. DHS states in their testimony today that there was a single point of failure in this case, human error on the part of the Border Patrol agent who let Mr. Speaker cross into the U.S. But I've done my own timeline of actions and inactions of DHS and CDC, and it suggests that we should have connected more dots. Trudging off a deeper analysis of this incident will only cause DHS to repeat its previous failures. For instance, after receiving the information about Mr. Speaker CDC on May 22nd, why didn't the Atlanta Office of Customs and Border Protection notify Customs and Border Protection headquarters or TSA officials about putting Mr. Speaker on the no-fly list? This would have ensured that Mr. Speaker's name was on the no-fly list prior to his departure from Prague. Why did CDC wait so long before divulging Mr. Speaker's identity to TSA? Even though they already shared his information with CBP, this delay resulted in Mr. Speaker's name being placed on the no-fly list after he had already crossed the border. Why did TSA official urge after 4 hours about the propriety of placing Mr. Speaker on the no-fly list? Why did CDC think that Mr. Speaker would turn himself into Italian medical authorities? If he was such a serious public health risk at that time, why didn't the CDC dispatch a plane to get him? Why didn't the CBP agent at the Champlain border crossing prevent Mr. Speaker from entering the U.S.? I asked the witnesses, did these breakdowns result from a failure of initiative? It would be unfair, however, to characterize this as a total system failure. We saw a lot of ad hoc decision-making by a lot of very capable people throughout the different agencies who tried to do the right thing. Many of these informed decisions certainly helped the response effort. But the fact that the best decisions were made informally suggests that we still do not have adequate operational control over our components. For instance, I was surprised to learn that it took TSA almost 4 hours to come to a legal argument to put non-terrorists on a no-fly list. The department should have the awareness of its policies and procedures to be able to make that decision with greater speed. DHS and CDC refer to an MOU in their testimony. Unfortunately, the committee has not been able to review that MOU to determine whether procedures were properly followed. Better, or at least more complete policies and procedures may have made a difference in preventing Mr. Speaker from coming across the border. This committee will explore ways in which we can make improvements for the future. It's equally clear that the federal government must improve the way we communicate information about an infectious disease to the public. CDC's announcement last week caused minor hysteria throughout the United States and abroad. There was a lot of mischaracterization about the public health threat that Mr. Speaker posed to his fellow passengers. One thing that I've learned over the course of the week is that TB is a common disease. 5% of the U.S. population has it, as does 1/3 of the world's population. So I'd ask our witnesses to take some time to discuss XDR TB and the ways by which it can be communicated so that the American people can fully understand what risk, if any, Mr. Speaker, posed to the public. I want to conclude my remarks by saying that I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to conduct oversight and improve the Department of Homeland Security. We had another failure of initiative here. Thankfully, it appears that we dodged the bullet. But that's not always going to be the case.